Hello everyone, welcome to the Redmen TV. It is a solo deep dive today from me, Josh Williams, on holiday this week. Regular programming will ensue next week. So I'm going to take you on a voyage of discovery today. I had an idea for a show, and it was Alexis Mac Allister and how he compared to the likes of Rodri, Bissouma and players of that ilk who were playing in similar position in ball dominant sides predominantly in the Premier League and are playing for big football clubs as well. So what I wanted to do was, I've got all the information. It's slightly different to how I would normally do a show like this, and in that I have got the comparison up on fbref.com, but I've not looked through the numbers, so I actually don't know how Mac Allister compares. So I want to draw conclusions maybe with you guys towards the end of the video, or you can make your own conclusions. I'm not trying to force feed an answer to this question, is Mac Allister comparing well or not on any of us. I want to look at the numbers openly with you guys and see whether he compares favourably or not. And maybe understand a little bit of why. And one of the other things I've done is I've prepared a little bit of a section after the numbers where I wanted to look at, how Arsenal are using Declan Rice and maybe talk a little bit about Andre. And then we'll just sort of summarise where we sort of stand in the numbers and the statistical viewpoint of Alexis Mac Allister so far this season. I am disregarding the eye test for this one because I find it fascinating to do this exercise at times. I know what my eyes are telling me already. And it's a much more important part of being a football fan is the eye test and the numbers. I get that. But I do find it fascinating, and other people do find the numbers fascinating as well. So I'm going to get into it now, and you can see in front of me, I've got Alexis Mac Allister versus Rodri versus Bissouma versus Rice versus Casemiro and versus Alexis Caicedo. So we're going to look at some of the standards. That's first and foremost. Alexis Mac Allister has started 11 games in the Premier League so far this season. It is a comparison of all these players in just this league season, so it's a fair representation for all the teams. In terms of goals and assists per 90, obviously Rodri, Declan Rice and Casemiro have scored. Mac Allister, Bissouma and Caicedo haven't. What the interesting stuff here is probably the progressive carries is where I would look at. Now, a progressive carry is where you move the ball forwards 10 yards, essentially. So Bissouma's top of this, and he's driving with the ball at his feet more than 10 yards, about 3 times per 90. Rodri, 2.47. Declan Rice, 1.54. Alexis Mac Allister, actually 1.43. So Bissouma and Rodri are way ahead of Rice, Mac Allister and Casemiro, who in turn are way ahead there of Alexis Caicedo. Now, progressive passes is the same thing essentially, but just a pass rather than driving out with the ball at your feet. And again, Rodri, the absolute pass master at this one, 10.5 progressive passes per game. You can see here he's the clear front runner. Casemiro 7.64, Bissouma 7.44, Mac Allister 7.35 and Rice 7.02. So the group of all 4 of those players, there or thereabouts. And then Alexis Caicedo much further down at 5.44. Progressive receptions is how far, it's when you receive the ball and it's been moved on maybe more than 10 yards. So Casemiro 3.33, Rodri 1.85, Rice 1.63. Then there is a big gap to Alexis Caicedo, Alexis Mac Allister and Bissouma. And again, that's where you are on the football field. If you're sitting deeper, where I'm guessing just by looking at this one stat, Caicedo, Mac Allister and Bissouma sit deeper for longer than Rice, Rodri and Casemiro. That's what that tells me right then and there. So, in terms of the shooting side of things, I don't think we're ever really going to learn anything in terms of shooting for defensive midfielders. So we'll move straight on to the passing, I think, next. The interesting one here is how many passes are you completing per 90, and I can see straight off the bat that it's Rodri by a country mile. Again, a massively ball dominant side in Manchester City, but the fella who is more involved and integral to that passing than anybody else on his team is Rodri. 107. That's outrageous, to be honest with you. Bissouma at 70, Mac Allister at 63, Rice at 60, Caicedo at 59, and then Casemiro playing for that Tim Pot side down the road, just 49. They're not as ball dominant as we are though, so you'd expect that to be lower. His pass completion, bit of a concern there. You can see Rodri's the best, then it's Caicedo, Rice and Bissouma all in 91%, and Alexis Mac Allister just a little bit lower down at 87, then Casemiro at 81, and this, I said I wasn't going to talk about the eye test, but this is something the eye test tells you, isn't it? We've seen him not complete passes during games where you probably think he should be, and that might be just his natural inclination to play those riskier balls from being a player who plays higher up the field normally. So yeah, that's quite interesting. Progressive distance, not really going to learn anything there, but other than Rodri's a monster in that category again, but he had the most progressive passes per game, so I'm hardly surprised there. Let's have a look at the short passing. Yeah, I'm quite, that's kind of where I expected Mac Allister to be, sort of middle of the road, medium passing, middle of the road, and then long passing. Actually, the second to bottom there, 3.98 per 90 and 2.67 for Bissouma. And this might be why, actually, his pass completion when he plays the ball long is only 65%, which is, again, look at Rodri, man. He's just a cut above all of these players right now in the stats. And again, the eyeball test will tell you that as well. So that's nothing new there. Goal and shot creation. This one could be an interesting one to look at, actually, because shot creating actions are, you can see it there. 2 offensive actions directly leading to a shot, such as passes, take-ons and drawing fouls. Shot creating actions per 90, unsurprisingly, Rodri at 5.56. Then it's Mac Allister at 2.55. Bissouma, Caicedo follow a little bit behind, then behind them, Casemiro and Declan Rice. And then in terms of goal creating actions, shock horror, Rodri top, 0.86. Caicedo, then Mac Allister. So far, I suppose he's come across bang in the middle, probably, of all of them. Rodri's the clear player at the top of this, and I'm not surprised. He's absolutely world class. But Caicedo, I know he's not had the best start to a season, of course, and Bissouma's had a good start and he's a good player. Casemiro's obviously an incredibly experienced footballer playing for a shite side, and Declan Rice, although new to a team, he's playing in a position that's familiar to him, so I would have expected him to maybe come out a little bit better. Defensive actions per 90 then. Let's have a look where we are with just the tackles. Bissouma top, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Then it's Casemiro, then Alexis Mac Allister, then Rodri, and his figures might be slightly depleted here compared to his passing figures, because again, Manchester City have so much possession. Then Declan Rice, again, might fall for the same thing as Rodri, to be fair. Then Moises Caicedo. That's a shocker from Moises Caicedo, because they are not a ball-dominant side in the same way that the rest of us are. His tackle win rate, or his won tackles, 3rd on there. So that's interesting again. This will be an interesting one. Look at that. The tackle win percentage for Bissouma, 79%. There's a proper old school sort of DM in that regard, isn't it? Where you're winning 8 out of 10 tackles. Rodri still though, 60%, close to. Moises Caicedo, 55. Declan Rice, 47. And Mac Allister 47 as well, and Casemiro the worst off. It doesn't surprise me that he's the 5th lowest, or the 5th, the second to bottom in that category, because he's not a defensive midfielder. It does surprise me that Declan Rice is there, to be honest with you, because I think of him as a good tackler. In terms of blocks, 2nd, 2.92 for Casemiro, Alexis Mac Allister 2.35. That's pretty good, to be fair. And block shots, Casemiro top, Caicedo just behind, then Mac Allister again. That tells me with his blocks and his shots, and let's have a look at his passes as well. Casemiro top, Mac Allister second at 1.94. That's telling me that he's understanding the positioning side of the game. He might not be the best tackler, but he understands the positioning. And let's see what his interceptions are then. Yeah, middle of the road again, 1.89 for Bissouma. Then it's Rice at 1.44. Mac Allister literally 0.01 behind. And then there's a big drop off to Caicedo, Rodri and Casemiro. What are his tackles and interceptions? Bissouma top, Mac Allister second. That is a surprise for me. Not after I've just read all of those stats, but it would be a surprise before reading those stats to have him second. Then there's actually a big drop-off again to Rice and Casemiro, and another drop-off to Rodri and Moises Caicedo. Clearances-wise, bottom, 0.71 clearances. Casemiro the most with 2.22, no errors for goals and stuff like that. So yeah, again, maybe not making as many clearances, but cutting more off its source. Probably a good thing for this Liverpool side. But you would maybe like to see him get more clearances if it's in that area of the field, of course. Possession, yeah, I'm not really too interested. I might have a look at the final third carries. Okay, so he's 3rd in carrying the ball into the final third. Okay, that's not too bad. 2.59 for Rodri, unsurprising. Bissouma 2.22, that's good for a player of his style. Then it's Mac Allister, Casemiro, little bit of a drop off to Caicedo, and a big drop off actually to Declan Rice, which is interesting. Carries into the penalty box. Bissouma, Rodri, Rice, and then Alexis Mac Allister. So he's not done that very often at all. So okay, so there's a big look at the old numbers. I've got to say, just from those numbers, it doesn't look like he's performing too badly compared to his peers. I can't completely discount the eyeball test, and that is, at times he doesn't have that spidey sense. I've said that a lot over the last few days, and I think that's probably the thing that lets him down. I think he needs to curb that enthusiasm to play those sort of riskier passes. But the numbers there probably give me heart that he can do the job. And I think there's been a lot of talk about Alexis Mac Allister over the last couple of days. And, it feels like he's just a placeholder, doesn't it, really? But one thing I did look at and notice is how Arsenal are using their defensive midfielder, because, a lot of talk about, we need a six, we need a destroyer and all that type of stuff. And I find that, I like to challenge every theory, essentially, and whether it's my theory or somebody else's theory. But when people start to talk to me and say, we need this, we need that, I like to go, okay, well, let's try and prove or disprove that. And one of the things that drew my mind to it was, I was watching one of the Arsenal games the other week. It might have been the game against, maybe it was City. And Declan Rice wasn't playing in the six. And it surprised me because Jorginho was playing in the six that day. So I went back and looked at the Arsenal lineups during some of their bigger games. Now, I can show you here. I'm going to pull up the game against Newcastle first of all. And we just go to lineups. Jorginho in the centre there. Declan Rice and Kai Havertz with him. Okay, that's a strange one for Newcastle. Go and look at the EFL Cup, that's a bit nuts. Let's have a look at the Premier League. Sheffield United. Declan Rice in the middle, no Jorginho. Okay, have a look at the Champions League. Jorginho, big game against a very experienced European side with Declan Rice. Okay, Jorginho back in. Chelsea. Jorginho with Declan Rice. City. Jorginho with Declan Rice. Lens, Champions League again, you'd expect Jorginho. No, Declan Rice. Bournemouth, Declan Rice, no Jorginho. What that tells me is, contrary to the popular sort of opinion of, you play Manchester City, you play Newcastle, you play, the bigger sides of your Sevillas, they're moving away from Declan Rice, who, although not a destroyer by any stretch of the imagination, is definitely more of a defensive midfielder with a bit more boom and oomph into the tackle than somebody like a Jorginho. And yet Arteta has gone the other way and playing a guy who, again, massively experienced, good player for a long time, but is a pass master. But a lot more Alexis Mac Allister than I think Moises Caicedo or Casemiro, for example. That for me is quite interesting. I don't really know where this fits in, if I'm being honest with you, as to what that means. Is Klopp looking at the system that Arteta's playing? Because I think he has done, and Pep Linders have done, and the City and the tactics that Manchester City employed along with Arsenal with this box midfield. Is he just trying this until we get somebody else? But are Liverpool genuinely looking for a destroyer? Because Andre's not a destroyer. Andre's more than a destroyer. Andre probably feels more Declan Rice than Makelele or Mascherano, as an example. A bit more box to box. Brilliant in the tackle though. Completely different to Alexis Mac Allister, completely different to a Makelele or a Kante or something like that. So I suppose the talk of this number 6 is, and why maybe the talk of Endo and all these types of things, I always find it fascinating because not every team is doing that, and I think I've just proved there that actually in the bigger games, Arsenal are going the other way and playing someone who wants to keep more of the ball. He wants to dominate the ball first and foremost, so he's putting Jorginho in there. Now Declan Rice may be, a bit more defensive minded than Kai Havertz as a player that's been dropped out. So yeah, maybe you're getting a bit more steel into your midfield that way instead. But I think that's fascinating, to be honest, and I don't think I can draw any conclusions from it, but I do think that's quite an interesting way of looking at it. And just for that whole sort of comparison with Andre and Alexis Mac Allister, now this is really difficult to do in terms of the stats, and because there are just so many more games played by Andre this season than Alexis Mac Allister. But I think if you were to look at maybe, let's have a look at his defensive actions. Tackles wise, Mac Allister, more tackles than Andre, more tackles won, but his tackling percentage is better. Andre's there, 56 to 47. Mac Allister, more than double the amount of blocks than Andre, more interceptions than Andre, and therefore more tackles and interceptions, and around about the same amount of clearances per 90, to be fair. So that's sort of like, well, we need that number 6 and we need a specialist number 6, but it doesn't have to be a destroyer type of number 6, of course. And it does beg the question of, is Endo going to be given an opportunity? We're going to see Mac Allister miss the Brentford game at the weekend, aren't we? So are we actually going to see Mac Allister in the Europa League against Toulouse and Endo in there, or is he going to shuffle the pack in another way that we've not seen coming before? Obviously no Bajcetic, you wouldn't imagine. We've seen Kurt Jones in the 6. If he doesn't play Endo against Toulouse, then you have to ask real questions about why. Because when Endo's been given those opportunities, he is a good footballer. I've said, for a while now, it's his position that concerns me, Endo, not his ability on the ball. I think he's really good on the ball. I think he's really good with his progressive passes, and just his passing in general is really good. But it is his position, and his speed. They're the things that probably worry me slightly. But I am enjoying watching him and learning more about him each time we do watch him. So yeah, I suppose in summary, in terms of the numbers, Alexis Mac Allister is on a par with most of his peers. The only player that I would put miles ahead of that group of players is Rodri, and I would have done that on an eyeball test as well. So maybe we are being a little bit too sort of harsh on Alexis Mac Allister, because ultimately Liverpool are third in the Premier League, and we're level on points with Arsenal. We're just a point behind Tottenham Hotspur, and we're only 3 points behind Manchester City. And Mac Allister is playing out of position with 2 lads that he's never played with before, in a formation that he's never played in before in terms of the inverted fullback thing, and with a forward line that is still finding its feet as well. So yes, he's taken the brunt of it, and yes, he needs to improve his passing and his tackling and all that type of stuff, but all told, I don't think he's doing as bad a job as people are making out, and I think that's what this showcases today. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed that little bit of a different deep dive. As I say, normal service will be resumed next week. Let me know your thoughts on Alexis Mac Allister and what you thought of the show in the comments. Do like it if you don't mind. It does really help us, of course, and it's just a click of the button for you guys. So if you enjoyed it, please like the video, and then if you want more deep dive, then you can use the code DEEP as a monthly captain subscriber on redmenplus.com. I'm doing another show next, and that show is all about Klopp's rotation conundrum, with the Europa League coming up, and obviously the suspension for Mac Allister and the injuries that we've got and stuff. So yeah, I think it should be a fascinating show. You can get 50% off for 2 months using the code DEEP if you sign up as a monthly captain. So please come and join us over there if this is your type of thing.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out the content today. If you want to get your name in and amongst these wonderful people, then head to redmenplus.com. Join as a Legend tier subscriber. You're going to get free merchandise codes. You're going to get in our Discord, and you're going to get your name at the end of YouTube videos. Yes, redmenplus.com, Legend tier status.